Hi, I'm Nicole Ferraro, and this is The Divide, a podcast from Light Reading exploring the ongoing digital divide, why and where it still exists, and what needs to be done to get people everywhere connected to reliable, high-speed internet. Today, I'm joined by Drew Garner, Director of Policy Engagement at the Benton Institute for Broadband Society, and Louis Riggs, a Republican state representative in the Missouri House of Representatives. We discuss the Trump administration's review of the BEAD program and its goal to make the program more tech neutral, and why Representative Riggs joined over 100 bipartisan state lawmakers to sign onto a recent letter organized by Benton urging Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick to let states proceed with their existing BEAD plans. We get into the major concerns behind that letter, why stakeholders want to see BEAD retain its fiber preference and state leadership, and much more. Okay, Drew and Representative Riggs, thank you so much for joining me. Welcome to the podcast. I am excited to get to talk with you both today about BEAD and the digital divide and broadband in the country. But first, it's both of your first times on this podcast, so I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourselves. Representative Riggs, let's start with you.
All right, well, thank you for the opportunity and being able to talk about BEAD and broadband, the digital divide, things that are near and dear to my heart since 2016. So I'd ask for a little bit of background. I was part of a group that sat down and met with folks from the northwest part of Missouri. I was part of the group that stood up the Northeast Development Partnership back in 2008, 2016. We all got together in the middle of the state, and we sat there all morning. We just kind of complained about everything in our lives and had a very good meal. Finished up the meal, the moderator gets up and says, "Now we got that out of our system. What are we going to do about it?" And put up the magic whatever paper on the wall, and I put 5 things up on the board. Number 1 was broadband. We never got to number 2. It was something that permeated everything we did. 8 of the 10 worst counties served in Missouri at that time were in Northeast Missouri, which is where I'm from. Not that way anymore, but we just basically decided to take the bull by the horns and crafted a legislative strategy. And since I've been around, elective government some way, shape, or form since 1984, volunteer for that, also volunteer for another group basically to skill up. And we studied case studies from all over the country and just basically got ourselves a position where we could go down to Jefferson City and talk to folks in government about what ailed us. And was fortunate enough, 2017, I think it was like February, then Lieutenant Governor Mike Parson was able to meet with us. We sat down with him. I sat on one side, and young lady from Kirksville named Carolyn Christman sat on the other, and we just hotboxed him. We need this, we need that, we need this, we need that, we need this. And so what we really need is a point person in Missouri government who will be responsible for broadband internet. And he just kind of looked at us for a few seconds and shook his head. He says, "I'll do it." So we looked at each other like, well, that was easy. That was, a really nice surprise. Sat down with the governor's policy director that afternoon, Will Scharf. Will was last seen handing executive orders to Donald Trump in the Oval Office. The guy you're seeing hand them to, that's Will, okay? Mm-hmm. Policy director, and sat down and said, "Will, it's the strangest thing. We were with the lieutenant governor this morning and said, we needed a point person statewide on broadband." He said he'd do it. And Will says, "Well, but the governor wants to do it." I'm like, "Don't care who does it, just needs to get done." And shortly thereafter, we have a notice, had sort of a mass meeting at Farm Bureau in Jefferson City, which is where we all go. And over 100 people in the room. I was the only one in there. It was grassroots. The other were industry people and government, what have you. And a lady named Janie Dunning, I've known Janie for a while through another group that I was a part of, stood up, and we talked to some people from Minnesota. They looked at their office and what they were doing, and stood up and said, "What we really need is a legislative champion in Missouri." And there were 2 legislators in the room, both of whom termed out in 2018. So I'm looking around, I was like, well, okay. And that was sort of like, I would say, the issue found me. I didn't find it, but it was the right time of life to do that. And we certainly needed it. At the time, Missouri was 45th, 46th, 47th, somewhere in that range in the country. It's like, well, there's a lot of work to be done here. So basically campaigned on it. I knew enough about it to be remotely dangerous, got elected, and just basically marched in there and just started moving things around. And a lot of what I just flat out educate people. And when you talk to suburban folks, they really don't get it, even though there's a few deserts left. St. Louis County has a couple north and south. All the rural folks really understood it because that was our lived experience. But it was kind of interesting to talk to the urban folks, and they have broadband deserts too, and those
Mhm.
approximate food deserts, if you can believe that. And on it goes. So the more I got into this issue, the more talking with folks, stakeholders, what have you. Well, by then, Lieutenant Governor Parson became Governor Parson. It's a long process. I won't go into the gory details. But let's just say we sort of had a meeting of the minds, and we're able to do a lot early on. He was able to put some money in. I'll tell you this much: the first 5 million was the hardest. It was a real
Mhm.
challenge getting that to budget. We had a one-person state broadband director, and we knew we were going to burn him out, and we did. But the thing that really kind of played into my hands, and sadly, but true, was COVID. So 19 goes into 20, COVID hits, and all of a sudden, people all over the state of Missouri have figured out, oops, we don't have very good broadband at home. And we saw that a lot in the urban areas, especially in urban core. People have checked out their hotspots. They didn't have enough cell phone signal to make the hotspot activate. That didn't activate, the laptop or whatever, the tablet they brought home with them to do their homework. They couldn't log into their schooling. A lot of learning loss. The one that really kind of fascinated me was I got a phone call from several constituents about it. It's like, yeah, I'm paying a premium price for my internet, between the hours of 8 and 4:30, and I can't push product out. And the spinning circle of death in the middle of the screen. Like, so I'm not sure what's going on there. Made a couple of phone calls, and was told by the Department of Economic Development that any given moment between those hours, 40 to 45% of all the bandwidth in the state of Missouri was soaked up by two entities: YouTube and Netflix. So everybody's home, and I mean nobody saw that, but it was like we're just kind of looking at each other like, what in the blazes have we gotten ourselves into? We have got to do a better job than this. So we came back, we were out of session for about 5 weeks before I left. The floor leader at the time, Rob Vescovo, said, we're going to get you out of here. I had a broadband bill that was, it was going through the House, and there was a real appetite for getting something done. I was able to put together the first omnibus. Got that done over in the Senate, lickety split. Had another broadband champion named Dan Hageman, state senator from the Northwest corner, which also suffers from really bad internet. And long story short, we were able to get some really good stuff through in 2020. 2021 came around, ARPA. All that money starts flowing in. It's like, we really have the opportunity here to sort of close this divide in a big, bad hurry, and was able to get $265 million between pole replacements and core funding out. 2022, very long process, but I was given an intercommittee by our Speaker of the House in 21, went all over the state, and he said, just find out what's out there, give me 5 or 6 recommendations we can translate into law in 2022, and let's go to work. Was able to do that. Had a really good experience with intercommittee, except that one time we almost had a fist fight in one of our town halls because somebody had bad internet, and the provider's in the room and said, my internet sucks. And the provider jumps up and is like, it's not my town. So the state representative's like, I got this. He went Phil Donahue on him. It's like, so they stopped it. But yeah, I mean, I talked to people in their 80s who couldn't make a Zoom call work for their doctors, still on dial up. I mean,
Yeah.
and the more you saw this, the more you went around. And I think my favorite moment was we were in Jefferson City. We're looking at FCC maps, and we looked over basically the entire state. One of my committee members jumped up when we got to his corner of the state, just ran up to the map and yelled, "That's a lie! That's a lie!" And it
Yeah.
was visceral. People were really upset. So heard a lot of testimony. Was able to basically craft an omnibus. I think we started out with 13 bills. 10 of those ended up in the omnibus, including the language that we have recently used to claw back defaulted funds from the FCC, in particular RDOF, with the 50% default rate in Missouri, 177 million that didn't go where they were supposed to. That has nothing to do with BEAD.
Right.
But long story short, the governor walks up to me in the governor's mansion, had a little reception up there for legislators, and walks over and says, "Yeah, I'm counting on you to deliver broadband internet for me this year." I'm like, "Well, thanks." But really, really nice having, that luxury of the governor has your back. So, whatever you pass out of there, it's going to be met with approval. Able to get some really good guardrail language in, and $265 million. Later, and it's basically the deal was we get the guardrails, the money flows, and able to get that first round out. A lot of that money went to Northeast Missouri, interestingly enough, because the statute says worst first, unserved, underserved, other. AT&T ran into some headwinds. They didn't get a dime out of the first round. And, everybody's complaining, like, did you read the statute? You're fishing in the wrong pond here. You're an underserved. We are trying to get unserved,
Right.
revise. So the process worked. We stood that up. So we had the guardrail where we could go out. Our folks could do site inspections unannounced, on and on and on. Some really good stewardship statutes, some vertical real estate statutes. Our tower program is going great guns. We opened up the process. I had one constituent who sent me an email with 40 data points in it, poking holes in the map. Forwarded that to the DED folks, and they're like, "Oh my God, this is great. We need more of these." And they ended up getting a tower out of that. It was one constituent who had done all that work. Is like, "Yeah, we've got a glaring mission here on this map, and here's your tower." So once we did the proof of concept, all this stuff really worked. It worked really well. More money followed, another 250-ish. So we're serious territory here. Senator Roy Blunt was able to push a lot of funding out for BEAD. 300 million of that 1.7 billion Missouri got was for degree of difficulty, really bad spots. We have them in my district. It's called limestone. We got other areas around the state that just flat out hills and dales, what have you. The Ozarks, really tough to get into those areas. So been a really good journey, had a really good time doing it, but we're still not there yet. And of course, this whole thing with BEAD blows up, and it's like, we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's not an onrushing train. No, it's the federal government getting in a hurry again, trying to put us back in the same straits we were in before all of this stuff happened. So the Cliff Notes version of this is the feds broke it, the states fixed it. Just leave it
All
alone.
right. Thank you. Thank you so much for that fantastic background. I feel like you really show the difference between having a representative who actually is invested in the topic at hand of broadband and versus somebody who maybe isn't as well versed or doesn't care as much. You brought the passion and the knowledge to this issue, and you made a difference in the state and are still doing so. Which is fantastic. So, Drew, I'm going to let you introduce yourself, but I'm also, before I do that, I'm going to turn to the topic at hand, which is the BEAD program. Representative Riggs, you've alluded to the fact that we're in a bit of a conundrum with BEAD at the moment. I'll do a quick high-level overview of where we're at, and then, Drew, I'll let you introduce yourself and fill in all of the remaining blanks. But BEAD is, of course, the $42.5 billion broadband equity access and deployment program that was passed in the infrastructure law in 2021. It's been taking shape in the last several years. FCC had to make a brand new broadband map. Every state needed a broadband office, and lots of other things have been happening in the time period that BEAD's been coming together. As Representative Riggs also alluded to, there have been billions of dollars in American Rescue Plan funding that have been going toward broadband in the interim as well. So where we find ourselves now is under a new administration, the Trump administration, and the Commerce Department is currently conducting a review of the BEAD program. And Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said in early March that his department would be revamping the BEAD program to take a tech-neutral approach and undo a variety of other regulations. So where I sit at the moment, my understanding is we're still waiting for those actual rules to come out. But last week, or a couple weeks ago when this episode runs, Drew, your organization Benton helped organize a letter of roughly 115 bipartisan state lawmakers to Secretary Lutnick asking to basically continue to allow BEAD to proceed as a state-run program as it was designed and to not delay things further. So that's it for my background. I'm going to turn it over to you, Drew, to both introduce yourself and your role at Benton and your role in the broadband world, but also tell us a bit about this letter, why you guys worked on bringing it together, who the stakeholders were that were involved, and your overall message to the Commerce Secretary.
Yeah. Thank you, Nicole. So my name's Drew Garner. I'm the Director of Policy Engagement with the Benton Institute for Broadband and Society. And Benton is a policy shop, a think tank, sort of a research institution that has been working on digital divide issues for over 40 years. So we have a long history of working to achieve fast, affordable, universal service across the entire country. So the BEAD program is sort of the latest and one of the biggest tools that we've had to sort of achieve Benton's core mission. And this letter, the 115 bipartisan state lawmakers from 28 states who signed a letter to Secretary Lutnick and to the NTIA staff, the core of that letter was, as Lewis said, to sort of allow states to have state authority over state programs. These are state programs. States are the ones closest to the problem. States have people like Representative Riggs who have been working on this issue for a long time. And these are the people who understand the issues and are best able to solve the problem. They've also been the people doing this work for the past 3 years. So to come in and undercut them at this late stage would set us back by quite some time and probably deliver much worse results in the end. So Representative Riggs and Representative Matt Pierce from Indiana, those are our two co-leaders. So Lewis helped to sort of get us to that 115 number, as did a number of other leading lawmakers from other states.
That's excellent. So tell us a bit about what the letter was actually asking of the Commerce Secretary.
Yeah, I think Lewis sort of puts it best, where it's like feds should get out of our way.
Right.
Like allow states to have authority over state programs. So it's let me just
sure. And while you're doing that, I'll also just say while you're pulling it up that one of the goals with the BEAD program was to leave it up to the states to decide how it was best to deploy that funding in their own communities, as opposed to the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, RDOF, which was handed down by the FCC and has experienced a load of problems since. So the concern that you guys are bringing up is that the federal government's going to strip that control back over the BEAD program and dictate which ISPs get the funding. Is that right?
Basically, the letter, essentially is just an appeal to, it points out the incredible work states have already done and the early results we're seeing with Louisiana, Nevada, Delaware, these like very high fiber builds while still incorporating other technologies. Just remarkable results that are promising to deliver fast, affordable internet service that will remain useful for decades. Mm-hmm. Like that is what we are about to achieve. And so the letter just basically says, let us keep these results.
Right.
Don't change the rules in the middle of the game, because that will require us to rerun a lot of these grant programs, undercutting our results, and depending on the changes the feds recommend, like probably result in worse outcomes.
Right.
And so it is a very simple message from these 115 lawmakers, just basically saying, like, don't mess this up.
Yeah.
It goes a little farther than that. And this is just federalism. All right. So, I'm a Republican. We talk about federalism all day long. This is what federalism looks like. Yeah. So we go back to CARES. It was clunky. Everybody hated it. We screamed bloody murder at the feds. The feds gave us ARPA. We loved ARPA. BEAD is sort of ARPA with all sorts of other stuff, added on to it, which I understand Biden administration did what it was going to do, and that's done. And I don't think a lot of people will mourn the loss of prevailing wage and a couple other provisions that, people just squawked about. Letter of credit was a real sore spot for a lot of folks. I knew providers who flat out wouldn't get into that space and were very good at what they did because the letter of credit requirement was too steep. Other folks, the planning side of it was too steep. And, there are other ancillary issues that really take away from the core function, which is the need for speed. And when we talk about fiber today, we're talking about a geometric progression over the last 10 years from 10-1, 10-4, whatever, to 100-100 symmetrical. That is the textbook definition of what geometric looks like. We've been there. All my providers are telling me the same thing at the same moment. We're going to do it again. It's called artificial intelligence. AI is literally soaking up all we've got, to the point where I've talked to our major utility providers in the state of Missouri. Is there a way you can build us a second nuclear plant across the river from Jefferson City? Well, yeah, in 10 years, $10 billion, sure. We literally don't have enough power today to meet our needs. We're not even talking about electrical vehicles. So when we talk about that need for speed, fiber delivers that right this instant. It will continue to deliver it for the next 30, 40 years. Dig once, forget about it. We can't say that about satellites, which is exactly the same boat we were in with CAF2, RDOF, and all that. So, hi, federal government, we're in a big old hurry here. We want to do a reverse auction and see how cheaply we can get this out here. And a lot of folks who stepped up, quote unquote, were fixed wireless. And you knew when you saw that bid, there was no way they could humanly get that done in the time frame allowed. 50% default rate in Missouri, the script wrote itself. But at the end of the day, the folks who were supposed to get it still don't have it. And you're talking about reconfiguring a program, which is running perfectly well, thank you very much. So wait another 6 months to a year for us to bureaucratically readjust to whatever the feds are mandating this week. And it's like, ain't broke, don't fix it. But it gets a little worse than that. So I look at this from a little more, I'd say, proactive standpoint. What else is out there that we haven't really talked about? National security is something we haven't talked about. Anybody who's following what China is doing right now, oh, we're in a little tariff war. Okay, fine, I get it. There's all sorts of controversy about Taiwan, and the Chinese have been launching military satellites for a good long while now. Saw a published report within the last 60 days. They're dogfighting in space with their satellites. Now, why on earth would they do that? So all our GPS is up there. So the way basically we see is dictated by satellites. Why on earth would we risk Pearl Harbor again over our communications network by something that is, gravitationally challenged to begin with? What goes up must come down. But you got Chinese killer satellites running around out there. And you can't fix that with a bucket truck or a trenching tool. These are satellites. Yeah. You can do that with fiber. They don't have Chinese killer satellites that can disrupt our fiber network when it's buried underground, unless they've got some sort of earthquake tool we don't know about. So I'm looking at this from all sorts of different angles, and people are telling me basically the same thing. Ain't broke, don't fix it, get out of the way, let the states choose what they're going to do. And Starlink does have a place. We know that. There are certain places hard to reach. I would say for Native American tribes, it's wonderful. We had an instance in Missouri. Osage Nation had some concerns about disturbing sacred ground. What happens? Starlink comes in and says, yeah, we can handle that. Third dimensional. Okay, so we take that problem off the board. I get that to a point. You'll never make a business case for fiber, ever. Towers, yeah, maybe, but everybody out there getting fiber. And I've got a governor who has a ranch at the end of a gravel road, and he complains about his internet. So there are still hard to reach places. We may never get to those with fiber. But the fact that we have 98% rate in Arkansas, and the backbone of their network for the unserved is their co-ops. I think it was 14 out of 17, pitched in and said, we'll do this. They're just lightning dark fiber. How hard is that? It's not. 90% in Missouri. Compare that with 50% for RDOF. And these are people who need it the worst. The worst first folks, that population needs to be served first. They cannot participate meaningfully in the 21st century at all without high-speed internet. We know that. The states know it. All the directors know it. The legislators know it. The only people who haven't gotten the memo yet are at the federal level.
Louis, to your point about Arkansas really showed up on our letter. Huge turnout. And I think for good reason, because they've had incredible results after just the first couple rounds of their grant program. They're on track to provide fiber to over half of their locations for less than a quarter of their budget. That's just the first couple rounds of grants. They still have more to go. So that is the sort of thing we are looking to protect with this letter.
Yeah. And I just want to point out, too, that, BEAD has been a tech neutral program all along. It has always allowed for some satellite and some fixed wireless. So there's sort of been this very false argument for the last several years that industry journalists like me have to cover repeatedly. But BEAD was designed.
When you're wanting to cap the sites, the locations, this far, no further, most of them are going to come in under that anyway, but by no means. So that extra 300 million we got And by the way, when we penciled this out several years ago, we landed on $2 billion is what we needed. We're a little over 2.2. So
Right.
we're there. All right.
Right.
So for us, this isn't pie in the sky or dark side of the moon. This is reality. We can get this done by 27, 28, and we'll be fine. We'll talk about this in the past tense. But when
Yeah.
they start saying, oh, we're going to put this artificial whatever on here, we baked money into the budget for that very reason. Those hard to serve whatever areas. They took care of that already. So why on earth would you go back, revisit that when they've already fixed that particular problem? To me, that makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I always find that there's a discrepancy between state lawmakers and what's being said on Capitol Hill, particularly with the Republican Party. Representative Riggs, I hear from Republicans in state government all the time, similar things to what you're saying. But for some reason on the Hill, it's been sort of Democrats fiber and Republicans not fiber for some reason. Do you have any understanding of what that's really about?
Well, I think that goes back to, quote unquote, picking winners and losers. All right. So let's look at what the feds have done this far. They don't get the history lesson part of it. The history lesson is what the feds didn't work. What the states have done does work. 98%, 90% versus 50%. I think one of the Dakotas had like a 79% default rate. How on earth do you justify shoveling out more billions, and hope that things are going to get better? Hope is not a strategy. Fiber is. Fiber is future proof. It is here. It is today. Why would you take a flyer on another whatever technology that may or may not pan out the way you want it to, but they're not going to be blasting down a gig from low Earth orbit anytime soon. And the satellites themselves, bless their heart, have to be replaced periodically. Yeah. Fiber does not. So we have a product, the proof of concept is already in the ground all over this great country of ours. Why don't you just pay attention to what works and what doesn't versus your talking points?
Okay, so in terms of this letter, have you guys gotten any response from the federal government, or do you have any indication of when the new rules are supposed to be coming down?
So, I do know that it was delivered to the people we sent it to.
Okay.
So they have seen it. They have not responded directly, though the committees of jurisdiction on Capitol Hill, the deputy administrator and the incoming administrator, or the likely incoming administrator, Ariel Roth, have received it, as has Secretary Lutnick. However, since we sent the letter, we also saw the West Virginia news where they are delaying the program. So I don't know if they listened to us. But we have also heard, we did get a lot of coverage. About 13 different outlets have sort of covered this letter, so it has made a lot of waves. To my knowledge, it is the first big bipartisan effort to sort of say, hey, hands off our programs. So I wish I had better news where I could say, yeah, I talked to Secretary Lutnick and he told me he's going to take this into consideration. But it's on his desk.
Okay.
He's been a little busy lately, so maybe that's it.
It's a bit of a hectic week for anyone in commerce.
There are a few other cards out there left to play, and I'm not going to disclose what those are, but we're at that point where, of course, they're settling in and all that other good stuff, and they may or may not get around to it. But the fact is that the drumbeat is rather continual. It's getting louder by the day, and they have to basically look at history itself and say, okay, before we take this major step, because we've fallen in love literally with shiny new objects in the form of satellites, is this the best use of our money? And I say, if you want to doge something, go doge RDOF. You people really want some red meat on your plate, go look at that pig in a poke and see what a horrible program that was from the get-go. Let's use census block methodology to say one person out of 1,000 has it, you're all covered, which is asinine. And then you look at the reverse auction itself, which rewards, it's great for toilet paper and condiments or paper towels, but it's not for a vital service like delivery of broadband internet. And any responsible city council would have thrown out most of those bids as being physically impossible to complete within the time frame allowed. But the Fed said, no, let's go ahead, wing and a prayer, and we'll just throw money at the problem and it'll go away. It didn't go away. And if you're preparing to basically do the same thing and say, oh, we've got this great technology, but it hasn't really been tested yet, why would you, in any sense of the word, sensibly do that?
Yeah.
And that's what really kind of bothers me is, well, yeah, BEAD's been out there for a while. Nobody's got the coverage. There's a reason for that. It's called maps. And if you want it to go where it's supposed to go, you have to put it in the right spot. And I sat down with providers. I've looked at their maps. They scoped this stuff out 9 months, 12 months, 18 months, 2 years. They can tell you within 2 weeks of where this is going to go based on their previous experience. Why on earth are we not talking to the providers to say, okay, how far along are you? Or, what's our real timeline to get this thing done using fiber, as opposed to switch horses in midstream, try another technology because we like it and we think it's it's going to be faster. Is it? Is it going to be cost effective? Is it ever going to generate the speed that we need? So the paradigm shifted under the Fed's feet, and they have ignored the fact. And instead, it's like, well, they didn't get the stuff out there in a timely fashion. Of course we didn't, because you screwed it up. Your maps suck. Your maps have sucked for a decade. You didn't even fix the maps. So we had to reinvent that wheel for you. We did it. All right. Give credit where credit's due. We're the ones out there solving the problems that you created. You dumped this in our lap. We made the best out of it, and we're delivering what we said we were going to deliver with the money that has been provided. What's wrong with that? It doesn't play well on Fox News. It's not a nice little headline somewhere on X. It's not, but it's reality. And these people need to understand that you shouldn't confuse activity with results. We have results at the state level. Give us credit for what we've done and back off.
I mean, really well said. I should just let you go there, but Drew, chime in, and then I'll wrap up in just a minute so you guys can get back to solving the digital divide. Go ahead, Drew.
Just another result that Lewis is talking about. So West Virginia, as we already said, have paused their plan after they finished their final proposal. So before they went to public comment, after they finished the whole 3-year project. Evan Feinman, former NTIA deputy, has seen their final plan and has vouched that it would have achieved 100% fiber coverage. So that is what is on the table. And now they have paused that. And now, according to their governor, they're going to pursue a tech-neutral approach. It's like, you have achieved right here, like, an outstanding, an unbelievable success. You have it done. You have it baked. All you have to do is step back and allow this to proceed.
Yeah.
But here comes Secretary Lutnick with a new announcement that we want to make these things more tech neutral. So the only way they can go now is backwards. Yeah. All they can do is go from full fiber coverage. In West Virginia, too, where there are mountains, there are trees, there are radio silent zones where satellite just will not work. So they have this perfect solution. Affordable, fast, scalable, future-proof service to every household that doesn't have it. They're going to walk back from that and probably replace some of these locations with satellite service that is slower, more expensive to the household. And as Lewis was saying, these satellite networks have to be rebuilt basically every 5 years. So there's this huge ongoing cost, and it's not going to be scalable for future needs. And this, like, what a tragedy to have achieved that unbelievable result and to walk away from it. And for what reason? Like, as far as I can tell, based on statute, any funds that aren't used for deployment shift over to non-deployment. That's the law. So if we save money by steering away from fiber now and going to satellite, that doesn't save the taxpayer money. That just gets repurposed for other uses. So, like, why are we doing this? What is the point? I think, and like,
the jaws of victory.
Say that again, Representative?
Snatch defeat from the jaws of victory.
And there you go, snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. Exactly. Yeah. One last question for you, Representative Riggs. How is Missouri responding to, like, are you proceeding with your plan for the moment? What's the state of things there?
Well, we're just doing what we do. So I've heard no indication from the department, BJ Tanksley, our director, anyone, that we're going to pump the brakes and sit here. We have a governor who gets it, big, bold letters. part of the administration that got it big, bold letters. And, the fact our Attorney General has swung into action on defaults, with RDOF, something that we were able to pass into law in 2022. Revised statute of Missouri 1.513, for those of you following at home, it's not trademarked or copyrighted. You can use it yourself. We get it. And, we're basically all systems go. I don't see any appetite in our state for any of this, except for getting stuff out there to people who need it. And I mean desperately. And you figure all those folks are RDOF who should have had it years ago and still don't. I've talked to providers in our state who literally came into my office and said, we have scoped this thing out. We were the second place finisher on RDOF. If they would bring these defaulted funds back tomorrow, we would be out there tomorrow. We got, it's all systems go. Everybody's out there doing it. We're out there 6-7 days a week. We're doing our jobs, and we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, which is serving the people of the state of Missouri with the funds that we have been given to get them broadband internet in as expeditious and efficient process as we humanly can. That's where we're at. And if there's anything different on that, I sure haven't heard about it. And I would. So I'm part of the Broadband Council. So I would have had that email by now.
Yeah.
And there's no appetite for us to sit here and say, yeah, let's turn the clock back. We know what that means. That was an epic disaster. Why would we wish that upon ourselves?
Okay, I could take this into 7 other topics, but I'm going to let you both go. And thank you so much for your time, and good luck with the rest of this. I hope we can catch up again soon and celebrate that BEAD is moving forward with the states in the driver's seat. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you again, Representative Riggs and Drew, for joining me. Thank you as well to Pierre Landrio for editing this episode. Be sure to subscribe to the Light Reading Podcast for more episodes of The Divide, as well as interviews and insights from the Light Reading team. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.